So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Inshallah, today I actually want to celebrate this moment, and we're going to be talking about just some things, inshallah, in regards to how to build a happy family, how to make family, how to build a relationship, all those different things, especially in the midst of the society where everything is materialized, where it is presented that in order to make a happy family, that it's all about making sure that you look attractive, making sure that he's also a six pack and all of that. And I think we have really lost what really builds the family in terms of the spirituality within it, or in terms of the values that the family is built upon, and what makes the connections right now in the society where everything is materialized, where what is presented from the cartoons or within the media or within schools, that what makes you important is really when you present yourself as sexually attractive as possible. When the man, the same thing, when he has the money, it's all about the money. It's all about bringing in the materialistic sides. And we had actually forgotten that what builds the homes is not necessarily all that outer appearance, but it's actually the inside. It's the integrity, it's the commitment, it's the principles that actually make the family. All that is presented in the media, I think, has been one main reason why we're seeing a lot of our families, a lot of our marriages falling apart so easily. Why? Because it's very impulsive, because it's built upon things that are materialistic, and once they're at least not necessarily totally gone, but once they're temporarily gone, once he loses his job, once she starts probably losing her appearance, that's when the man is ready to give up on his wife and the wife is ready to give up on her husband, and then they can't even stay in a committed relationship anymore. Why? Because the relationship is not built upon, from the very beginning of it, it wasn't built upon a commitment or even a principle, but it was built upon the materialistic foundation. When things are built upon the materialistic foundation, once that materialism starts fading away, you will see the relationship fading away with it. So that's why I decided to actually give, well, how does Islam actually build homes? Why did we have before relationships that were more committed, marriages that lasted longer? What were they built upon? Why did they last longer? What are we supposed to be? What are we supposed to be building within the relationship? Now, one thing, when we say Islam is about inner spirituality, that certainly does not mean that we have to take away the romance and the love and the companionship. That certainly doesn't mean that. In fact, the ayah actually straightforward says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهَا أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا. The ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Rum that amongst his signs and amongst his signs of his majestic signs are different signs, and part of them that he had created from amongst you azwajan, spouses, so that you would find tranquility, love, and companionship in. لتسكنوا إليها وجعل بينكم مودة ورحمة. المودة is actually farther than just love, because love or lustful love, it fades away once the lust has been fulfilled. But il-mawadda is more is more than just a relationship where it's two bodies meeting together. Il-mawadda involves where we would have our feelings together. We would have our feelings, whether it was at the low and the tide and up and down. We would face the different challenges together, no matter what it was. whether it's a disabled child or whether it's uh, a loved relationship that was going up and down, or whether it's financial situation getting lost. It's where we put in that commitment. Love goes farther than just the materialistic things. That's what mawadda is. That's what will build in sukoon. What is a sukoon? Is sukoon is when everything is subtle. When everything is subtle, that is sukoon. In other words, it's a different word for peace. In order to bring in peace, there's no way that you can bring in peace unless you learn how to not let those impulsive moments overcome you and create agitation, anxiety, or different impulsive behavior. That's what sukoon is. It's not that you're not angry. You're a human being at the end of the day. But it's that within marriage, you had learned how to keep your cool. Why? Because you recognize, Wallahu khayrun hafidha. Because you recognized that it's not necessarily my fault or his fault. Yes, I'll have my shortcomings, and he will have his. It's so easy to always point the finger and say, it's your fault. But in a relationship in Islam, it's not about trying to prove the other person as it's their fault, but it's trying to say, how can we make things work? Because we've got our shortcomings. We're human beings. It's all about that companionship in a relationship where we're looking at each other, trying to prove that it's your fault and my fault, and each one is trying to point the finger at the other. It's all about trying to make you feel guilty. It's all about trying to make you feel pain. But in Islam, in a relationship that is built upon mawadda, rahmah, mercy, love, companionship, in order to bring about the sukoon, it's learning how to go beyond making others feel pain to making others feel the peace. Let's work it out together. We're going to have our shortcomings, for sure. But that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling us that no, I want you to focus on how to make the relationship be the place of sukoon by making it within mawadda and rahmah. But that's not a word to necessarily just say and somehow create a narrative. It's not a narrative here, but it's actually all about really making it a serious thing that is applied in our life. Now, here's one thing. When you look at the romance, love, or companionship, of course, there are a number of different things. When we look at romance, it's usually a feeling of excitement, mystery, and associated with love. And that's why you would find true love is not the love before marriage. The love before marriage is all about really getting into that fantasy of a relationship. The fantasy within the relationship. Once it is fulfilled sexually, then you come across the reality of life. But once that person didn't actually deserve or wasn't actually living up to the challenge, that's when they will snap at them. That's why Islam tells you, well, before you even create the romance and before you even go into that type of fantasy, Islam tells you, I want you to get other people involved within your family to help you with their experience make the right choices in your life. Because at a moment of fantasy, it is easy for you to make the wrong choices because you're not living reality then. but living fantasy. And what fantasy is built upon is really just an imagination of what in your mind appears to be nothing but a flowery world. That's why when Islam talked about romance, before even talking about romance, he said, I want you to just recognize that the relationship, وَمِنْ آيَاتِ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُم. He had created you from your own self, from your own selves, and where you recognize you've got a mission to go to. The mission is not to build this life, but is to build the hereafter. This life is just a bridge to the hereafter. Life is short. So therefore, the Prophet, peace be upon him, had taught us that إِذَا جَاءَكُم مَّن تَرْضَوْنَ دِينَهُ وَخُلُقَهُ فَزَوِّجُوهُ. What are the first things that I need to look for in a husband? He said, well, if you get someone that you would accept or you're content over their piety, their religion, and even their morality, and their morals, and their commitment, and their integrity, then get them married. And if you don't, that's what's going to create and cause destruction on earth. What is that all for? Well, that's in order to give us the instructions that what to look for in a husband or in a wife. The first thing is really their recognition of the main mission that preceded their existence, which is the hereafter. This life is short. Within a second, you could just be in the transferred world, in the other world, in the hereafter. Just a second, a split of a second, and you're all of a sudden part of the people under earth. Split of a second. So the whole idea of marriage is just a pathway in where it is to help you find the companion that will take your hand to get to Jannah, to get to heaven, to get to the hereafter. When the Lord Almighty speaks of the hereafter and says that day where everyone will be standing in fear, what have we done? What have we done in this world? What have we done? What did we use the privileges that we were given for? Did we use them to actually increase and elevate our ranks in the hereafter? Or were we just working to increase and elevate our positions in our social appearances in front of people? What were we doing? What did we use our privileges for? So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet were teaching us that the first thing you want to look for in a husband or a wife is their piety. Why? Because your aim is there. Your aim, your vision is right there in the akhirah, not in this dunya. إِذَا جَاءَكُم مَّن تَرْضَوْنَ دِينَهُ وَخُلُقَهُ. But it's not enough to have the religion. Somebody could be a true faithful person, but when it comes to dealing with people, they could be the lowest of the lowest. Impulsive, angry. Whenever they're angry, they would be using all the bad words that you could think of. But that's why the Prophet, peace be upon him, was talking about the morality to be included. Morality is built upon 4 major things. Number 1, knowing justice. 2, living patience. 3, recognizing and standing in front of all the different offers or privileges somebody might be getting, but then to them, integrity is more important than any offer. They'll live the satisfaction, but that's not enough. To be living the word of justice is to also have the courage to apply justice despite all the challenges that might be there. That's why in the second one, it's about enduring patience. Whether the patience was as a result of an illness or as a result of loss of money, as a result of some kind of a social a social challenge, or whatever it is. That's what it means to actually live the akhlaq. Recognize justice, living the patience, recognizing that despite all the offers, having that satisfaction in standing up and having the courage. Now, once we look at that, that actually brings us to the second part of it, in where, yes, piety and morality are important, but that's because you wouldn't really be able to recognize whether that person is worth getting your romance. Because the romance, a lot of it, we would live it in a different stage. The beginning of it is a stage of attraction, and a stage of getting some form of connection, in where the guy is connected to probably the girl's appearance, the girl's probably connected to his more of a certain, let's call it behavior, or certain, he's funny, he's attractive, he most of the times certain things about his appearance, or at least his way of dealing with things. Guys are more attracted to girls' appearance. Girls are more attracted to the words that the guys make, the promises that they make. And they don't really know whether these people are committed to them. Women are actually a lot more loyal in their love than men. Way more. Women, their love is really part of their nature. She's looking for security. Her nature is helping her find places. I want someone. It's kind of finding someone that will protect her nest. She's looking for security. She's looking for someone that will be there to give her that for her future nesting. But for the man, it's usually different. For the man, it's usually finding the right place for fertility, right place for him for sexual activity. So that's why when we're talking about romance in the initial stages, it really is, yes, a woman is a lot more loyal, but then many men, sorry to say that, but many men, and this is not at all acting in any way where it's doing misogyny or men hatred whatsoever, but this is reliving a reality. Many men, they know what girls are looking for, and they'll give you the sweetest talk. They know what they're looking for. So they'll be the ones to actually tell you the things that will give you the comfort that you're looking for. You can, in the beginning, you can fall for it. But then once they get what they wanted, they'll actually appear at the reality of what they really are. And that's why when you look at love, it doesn't always equal compatibility, nor does it mean that people are meant to stay together for a lifetime. So Islam tells you, I want you to consider what is more important than bodily attraction. Pay attention to this one. Islam tells you, I want you to be mature. Look beyond what people will portray within your age group, especially the younger generation. It always makes it as if it's an issue of compatibility. We're attracted to one another, we love each other, we share same culture, we share same language, we talk about the same funny stuff. In the beginning, it would seem like it's some form of compatibility. But Islam tells you, well, I want you to think farther, because does romance really reflect what we're looking for? And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, wait a minute, your body many times can manipulate you and make you think that, yes, I'm attracted to that person, therefore this person is what I need. is what my body wants. And especially in a society where it's all about, yes, individualism, I feel, therefore it should be. We're in an age where never before would a patient actually come to a medical doctor and say, I feel this, therefore you should give me these medications. I feel that I am this sex, therefore you should give me those puberty stoppers or whatever it is. It's like never before was that ever in history does a patient actually say, I would want puberty blockers because I feel this way. Never is that ever any way of diagnose ever in the field of medicine or any field. But then we're living in an age where it's not only in medicine, but that's the same thing in psychology, where people right now, same thing coming, I feel, therefore I want. And even when we're talking about family, the girl would come and say, I know this guy is right for me, but my family doesn't want him. I know this is the right man. And then they would insist in thinking that the romance or the feelings or whatever she's feeling or he's feeling, that's enough to prove that this is right for them. So Islam tells you, no, no, no. I want you to onboard, add with you your family, your wali, to help you make the right decisions, because your body can manipulate you into a romantic, fantasized relationship and not recognize that the reality of that person, when things really come with realities, that the reality of that person will snap at you. Because whenever we're impulsive and we let our emotions make the decisions for us, we have to keep in mind reality does not bend to your emotions, but you have to recognize that your behavior, you have to bend it to fit the reality that surrounds you. Because if you don't, then you are the one living a fantasy. If you want to live a fantasy and think that, no, the world has to change because I want it to change, welcome to the reality of planet Earth. It won't change because you want it to. It doesn't work that way. And unfortunately, the situation is that we're actually getting all that newer generation in where they think everything works just like a video game. Where with a video game, it's about what? It's about me clicking a button and it should work. It should actually go the direction that I want it to go into. Without recognizing, world doesn't work as a video game. There's a reality, and the reality will not bend to you. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and even when it comes to true love, it really comes when the person that you get married to proves that they were committed, that they really are capable of making a secure home, that they were really capable of living al-akhlaq and morality, that they were capable of respecting you, that they were capable of showing you love, they were capable of showing justice, patience, satisfaction, and courage when necessary. Once you're capable of seeing that, then that's you as a female. You will recognize the masculinity of that man. That's when love starts, the real love starts coming up on the surface. It's not the fantasized love, but it's the love which is what is mentioned in that ayah, al-mawadda. That's the love that contains al-mawadda, in where it's not the love that is fantasized or that is based on feelings of lust, but it's actually a commitment that you had seen this person practice, and where that's what will build and ensure longevity within this marriage. Once there's commitment, willing to live the principle rather than your selfishness is the main thing that actually brings in what it means to compromise in marriage. When we say compromise in marriage, is that yes, sometimes he'll have his shortcomings. Sometimes you'll actually live a moment where, yes, he didn't necessarily recognize that at that moment you were probably struggling with probably cramping during your period. He didn't recognize the pain. And when a man has a flu, it's like he's almost getting a baby. Right? It's like he's getting a baby. And when you're getting a baby, oh, come on, don't exaggerate. Right? You don't exaggerate. My auntie had her baby while she was, doing all the harvesting. And my grandmother had her baby while she was building a house. And all of a sudden makes you feel and appear like nothing but a little cookie. Right? That's the reality. But there are going to be those times where indeed they're not going to necessarily recognize the pains that you go through. But what is happening right now is a lot of the stories that are being brought up to the surface at many times are actually, I would say, ruining our expectations of our husbands. So we would hear all the stories. And right now, the media has made a lot of these stories accessible to us, in where we would hear more negative stories than good stories. And what we end up with, especially with the feminist narrative right now, bringing to the surface, ladies, you're in danger. Ladies, you have to be secure. Ladies, he's trying to do this. Ladies, he's a narcissist. And the word narcissist, all of a sudden, everybody is an expert to diagnose what a narcissist looks like. And right now, almost every single day, I would get a woman calling me, telling me that her husband is a narcissist. I can understand that perhaps the lifestyle had probably indeed increased the level and the number of people that are probably acting in a narcissist way. But to actually make it seem like it's at every single home, it's everyone is a narcissist, is definitely exaggerated. There's absolutely no way that everybody is a narcissist. But this is actually telling us that the narrative, that the feminist agenda and a lot of the mental health right now is actually increasing and bringing in more illness, unfortunately. A number of different reasons to it. That's a different story. But what I would like to say is that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would tell us about, well, what it means to have sabr, what it means to live the azima, what it means to live the compassion, what it means to live and endure all the patience, it is really telling us that don't always wait for the other person to practice morality for you to practice it. Because if you want to practice hospitality when the other person is practicing hospitality, then you're not practicing hospitality. Then you're just trying to practice some sort of you give me and I give you, not hospitality. Most of the times, and especially in the society that we're living in, it's all about, yes, You give me this much so I can live the akhlaq of this. A reality of a business mindset. Family is not a business mindset. Family is not at all a business mindset. Neither is marriage, is not a business mindset. A business mindset, I give this much, I take this much. It's a trade-off. Family is not like that, because family is a commitment. It's not that day, I actually helped you do this much. And on this day, you got to help me do this much. Because living akhlaq in Islam is not about or dependent on how others live their akhlaq. Because if you're going to be nice because others are nice, not because you are nice. If you're going to live your principle because others are living the principle, then you're not necessarily a person of integrity. True integrity, true akhlaq, true principle is when you are nice, even when others are mean. You are just, even when others are oppressive. You are courageous when others are not putting their bravery in place. All the akhlaq are like that. Morality is really about you living the principle when others have failed to live it. Because if you're going to be mean to a mean person, and you're going to be rude to a rude person, and you're going to be selfish with a selfish person, and you're going to be stingy with a stingy person, then you're going to be a person that is stingy, a person that is rude, a person that is mean, a person, and you list all the bad akhlaq, and you're going to have it. But Islam is always telling you that true, genuine akhlaq is when you live the morality even when others have abandoned it. That's what it means to live morality. That's what it means to live the akhlaq, that willing to live the principle even when the other person is not living it entirely. Now, to ensure that relationships are built not on impulsiveness or sudden and temporary emotions, Islam looks for certain descriptions that make the relationships last longer and fruit feelings of love. Number one, the Prophet ﷺ, إذا أتاكم or إذا جاءكم من ترضون دينه وخلقه فزوجوه. Number one, we mentioned it earlier. Who you would accept, the religion. 2, their morality. Number 3, خيركم خيركم لأهله. The best of you, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, the best of you is the best one to his own family. The best one is the best one to his own family. What was that? Religion and morality. خيركم خيركم لأهله. True and the best morality is the one that is best to his own wife. But in order for you to know whether he is going to be a man that is going to be committed to his own wife, see how he's committed with his sisters. How is he living with his sisters? How is he living with his mother? Is he recognizing his mother's emotional moments? Is he recognizing his sister's moments of weaknesses? How does he relate with them? or is he considering his stingy, or at least his masculine, authoritative personality take over? Because you, as a female, you've got a lot more in common with his sisters than actually with his brothers. And of course, men, they understand each other, but they don't always understand women. A very important book to read for women and for men. Women Are from Venus and Men Are from Mars. I always recommend that book. It's extremely funny, but very well written. Very well written because it actually goes within the mind, and at many times we fail to recognize how our behavior speaks our mind differently. What do I mean by that? So a woman might actually ask for something, say, well, yeah, I want this to be done. And what she wants is not that she wants this to be done. Of course, she's asking her husband. She actually wants something else. Women are pretty straightforward in what they want. They expect to somehow make it a hidden way because they like surprises. Men, they don't know how to do that. They don't know how to do that. She probably wanted a flower. So, but he doesn't know how to think like that. She asked him to go to Target and go probably in the flower section. She thought maybe he'll recognize that I wanted a flower. So she would purposely tell him to go to the flower section, or at least not necessarily straightforward, but she'll make him pass by on her phone, on her FaceTime. He didn't recognize that she wanted a flower. Walaikum salam. But then when he comes back, she's actually going to a tantrum. Empty-handed, didn't even get me a flower. He didn't understand that she wanted a flower. He was just passing by. So, sisters, one of the easiest ways, number one, understand how men think. They don't know how to understand hints. They don't know. If you want something, say it straightforward. What do you want? They don't know how to understand. They don't understand hints.
Everybody says you should say directly to him what you want.
Exactly.
Don't they listen what we expect? So they should learn about these things.
No.
So
It's a different brain chemistry.
it's a different brain chemistry. Exactly. It's a different thing. Here's one thing. When you actually say, well, can't they just think that way? All right. When you say, can't they just think that way? It's
directly.
so here's the thing. When we actually say, can't they think the way we think? It's exactly like saying, can't a short person just be tall and imagine tall? It's beyond a person's capacity. It's beyond their capacity. So to actually expect a capacity that is not how their anatomy is built to see is actually asking for something that is beyond their capacity.
But they don't see also.
They don't.
Yeah.
They don't. Exactly. There you go. You're like, it's right there. And they all of a sudden say, they can't even see it. It's like, it's right there. It's right there. You would ask for certain details. They don't even recognize the details. You're looking at all the details and all they could see, it's like, it works. You're like, I know it works. But there are certain structures that need to be there. They don't recognize it.
Wasn't he very in to that? Where he did understand his he was able to take those very subtle messages that.
So
But even with the Sahaba.
let me say one thing. the Prophet ﷺ was actually given, number one, yes, he's a human like any other human, but he was also given certain, let me call it, capacities that are not necessarily totally human. Yes, they're all human. He's human, but certain things, like for example, being able to sleep with all his wives in the same night. This is not 9 wives. Who could do that? Or even certain things, and where he was also capable of. He was also capable of, well, I don't want to say boycott, but abandoning or leaving his wives for a whole month. All right, so there are certain things that are quite different. His intelligence, where he was capable of being a military leader, political leader, and even a social leader, all of that. So there are certain things that we don't expect our average men to necessarily embrace and be exactly like the Prophet, peace be upon him. I'm talking about the marital aspect. Even if we were to go in other things, and where the Prophet, peace be upon him, even the way that the Sahaba themselves had actually described him, they described that he, sorry about that, I don't know how to, okay. Even the way that the Sahaba had described him, in where they described that he was, in his appearance, very handsome, and where many times they would even be shy to look at his face. And so there are certain things that we can't necessarily expect. Yeah, I want you to be like the Prophet. Well, are we also like the Prophet ﷺ's wives in their capacity and in their Islam? So I think.
Well, when raising, let's say we're raising our sons and the relationships that they have to get in and go into when they're older, wouldn't we want them to understand, like, if their wife sends them to Target, we'll get the flowers?
So
that's what I'm not in art, but the way we're raising our children.
So I agree with you that sometimes with training, people can learn how to decode different ways of how people think. We can learn how to do that, right? But even when we learn certain things, sometimes, there are certain things that you can be built with a certain skill. I can probably learn how to study medicine and learn certain things, but some people, they're built on the inside with high IQ that they can actually master it more than other people. Some people with math, they just have it built on the inside of their brain that they can just master it, even if they don't even get the special tutoring. And that's the same thing. There are certain things that you can train, but there are certain things that you have to recognize that certain people, they just don't have the capacity for it as much as you do. So recognizing that that person doesn't necessarily have the full capacity that you would expect is recognizing the reality, is also embracing their, let's call it, the capacity that they don't have. Just like you want them to embrace your capacity. It goes both ways. You want him to embrace what you're incapable of doing. You also embrace what he's incapable of not doing. And that's what it means to actually compromise. Sometimes they might not understand everything. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ in the hadith, for example, لا يفرق مؤمن مؤمنا. A man should not have the hatred upon his wife in ways where it's like giving her more than what you can handle, because you might hate a certain behavior from her, but don't expect it to be like you. That's why the Prophet ﷺ actually said in the hadith, when he talked about women, and he basically said, hey, women are built with a bent rib. What is the bent rib? It's right there in her anatomy. Just recognize her anatomy is different. And if you try to somehow think, I'm going to fix her anatomy, I'm going to get her into a structure, you're doing it wrong. The Prophet ﷺ is telling you, you're doing it wrong. And that's the same thing. Maybe he didn't mention about the men having a bent rib, but their ribs are different. We're not just talking about a rib in terms of anatomy. We're not here, trying to talk about a skeleton and all the different physical structures. This is not talking about a physical structure, but this is actually speaking about a physical structure and how it might even have its implications on even a behavioral implication, and how it's actually having a psychological implication as well. All of that together, in where if we don't recognize the differences in the body, in the psychology, in the behavior, then you're not going to be capable of embracing those differences. That's what it's all about. That's why the Prophet ﷺ was actually mentioning it right there. So that's why the ayat were actually always emphasizing ashiruhunna bil ma'ruf. When you want to deal and work with your wives, and when you live with them, the word is ishra. Ishra is different than life, because al-ishra actually means to have some sort of life, some sort of companionship. And that companionship is what brings in that sukoon, that peace, that settlement. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. What is al-ma'ruf? Al-ma'ruf is with integrity. In other words, when you live, when you deal with your wives or your husbands, it's not about a business relationship. This is what I invested, therefore you should invest this much too. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. It's all about living the integrity within the relationship. Not waiting for the other person to live the morality so you could live it too, on the other hand. But it's you being genuine with your akhlaq, regardless of the other person, because that is what is going to be in a normal stance. I'm not talking about those cases where they're exceptional cases, where certain people, when you act with integrity with them, they will step their boundaries. We're not talking about those exceptional cases. Certain people, indeed, you act with integrity with them, and they will cross their boundaries because they will see that integrity as a weakness. Certain people, you gotta teach them how to recognize the boundaries by telling them, move out. We're not talking about those exceptional cases. We're talking about at least 80% of the cases in where we're trying to put in the narrative that is at least the majority other, and definitely in contrast to the feminist narrative that's always building in our minds that, ladies, you gotta come in with your power. Even when it comes to education, it's an empowering the women. It's trying to fight for your rights, and etc. This type of lexicon that is nothing but a military lexicon, a military wording where it goes into the marriage, and all she sees is nothing but her husband as an enemy. Once she only sees nothing in her husband but as an enemy, then the house becomes nothing but a place and a battlefield. Simple as that. It becomes a battlefield He's yelling, she's yelling, and they're all at each other's throats. And the children are the victim in between these two big warlords that are trying to each destruct the other and prove that they had won.
And they learn, it's the long-term implication.
Absolutely.
They turn out to be the same.
They turned out to be the same.
Especially the boys.
Especially the boys.
Yeah.
Because boys it's part of their own structure, where part of their own nature, that feeling authority, protecting territory, we have a lot in common with animals. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually tells us that وَمَا مِن دَابَّةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا طَائِرٍ يَطِيرُ بِجَنَاحَيْهِ إِلَّا أُمَمٌ أَمْثَالُكُمْ. The Lord Almighty tells us that every beast or animal that walks on land, or a bird that flies up in the sky, دَابَّةٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ طَائِرٌ يَطِيرُ بِجَنَاحَيْهِ, it's actually a nation exactly like you, where they're trying to secure their territory, authority. Girls want to build their nesting, etc. Same thing. Exactly the same thing. But then the feminist agenda wants to tell us that for the boys, if they want to work on their authority, or they want to work on securing their territory, that's narcissism. Islam tells you, well, it depends, not quite. Not quite. It depends how this instinct is used. It depends how it's used, but it's actually there in where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually called it the qawama. Il-qawama is actually feeling that they need to secure their territory, that they need to be in authority, that they need to be in power, because that's what makes them feel their masculinity. That's what makes them feel that they were committed to what they have to be doing. And therefore, once any man goes into fighting them with that, what do they start doing? Exactly like the animals, with the horns, with the scratching, they start going violent. And that's one main thing that I think the modern society had really failed to teach women. When the man wants to secure his authority, wants to secure his territory, don't butt heads. Don't butt heads. Try to see and help him how to secure the territory, if it's to secure the territory. Don't butt heads with trying, no, I'm going to be in authority. Because the second you want to butt heads, even for a man, when he wants to butt heads with him, he's willing to put his life at stake. That's a normal masculine nature that you will find in lions, in eagles, in dogs, in every single one.
But sister, there are women also like that.
There are women that are also like that.
Very authoritative, I've seen.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
Absolutely.
I've seen some cases that's like, my children is my property, I produce them.
This is not authoritative, my dear.
Yeah.
This is part of our own nature. This is not the same authoritative to be
As a man.
men. That's different.
But women can be.
Hold on. So with women, it's part of our nature to secure our children, secure our family. It's part of our nature. All right? It's part of their man's nature as well. He wants to secure the family, make sure maintenance, etc. All of that. Secure his wife, etc. This is mine. Property, mine. You dare get, hey, you don't even need to cheat a 2-year-old to do that. They'll take the toys, mine. You get to it and they'll either bite or they'll scratch, etc. Depends on what they had learned to do. And sometimes you don't even need to teach them. It's just a human nature. Okay. I'm not saying whatsoever that this human nature, all these natures, that they're always to be given the excuses that it's okay to do. All right. I'm just here presenting some of what the modern society had failed to see in human nature, in spouses, in wives, in our human nature, and how at many times it wanted to present a new presentation that is totally opposite to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had described as human nature. The reason why I mentioned الرجال قوامون على النساء is because right now we're getting a new feminist Muslim narrative that is right now presenting that, oh, this is a narcissist, etc. And yes, no, it shouldn't be like that. We're all supposed to be together and mutually together, and everything is supposed to be like it's at the same level. But whether you're at work or whether you're at school, you recognize that there are different ranks. There's a boss, there's a dean, there's a supervisor, there's a manager, there's the person that works as a janitor, and each and every single person has a certain role, exactly like a triangle. But unfortunately, the feminist agenda was infiltrating our minds, wanting us to not see the reality of the triangle at home, but wanted us to see it outside, and made it as if it's an issue of power fighting. And then we ended up, as a family, we ended up losing our roles, losing our commitment, losing our love. Why? Because the reality snapped in our faces. Because this is the reality. The reality is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created men and women differently. So therefore, embrace the reality rather than fight it. Because the second you fight it, it will snap in your face. That's the whole idea. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had even described pious women and what makes a good female companion. He basically described فَالصَّالِحَاتُ قَانِتَاتٌ حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ بِمَا حَفِظَ اللَّهُ. Now, these four descriptions are actually rather really interesting. فَالصَّالِحَات, the pious women. قَانِتَات, they're obedient to the Lord Almighty and obedient to their spouses. Why is she obedient? Isn't that condescending? Why is that making her feel or even seem like she's a slave within her household? Why can't we say that it's all about mutual respect? This is not at all saying that there shouldn't be mutual respect. There's oftentimes a dichotomy that people would practice in where thinking that by saying that she has to be obedient to her husband, there's the dichotomy in putting words in your mouth and assuming that we're saying she doesn't have rights. This is not at all saying that. So when we say that the ayah is saying qanitat, obedient to Allah and obedient to her husband, this is actually speaking about that she is not disregarded in her rights at all. But part of making a sustained home is by obeying the husband in what is actually ma'ruf, in what is good. If it is beyond your capacity, sorry, objection, this is beyond my capacity. I would love to do it, but I really can't. Now, what do we get? We get winning the heart is more important than winning the argument. Even when you want to object, you can say, I can't. On that day, I'm tired, or I am back from work. I couldn't do the job. Winning the heart is more important than winning the argument. But when it's about trying to win the argument, then you're basically butting heads. Then you're trying to fight. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says for the third category, حافظات للغيب, they preserve their homes, because we as women, we like speaking our feelings and our minds. So what do we end up doing? We end up sharing our information to the outside.
Oversharing with quality and corporate world.
And what we end up doing is, instead of making our homes private, they become public property. Simple. And once your home becomes public property, in where your information or your husband's information becomes public property, then other people will start investing. And they'll start putting their ideas inside your home. And that's one thing I would like to advise. Do not get your family or your husband's family involved in your problems. Figure it out yourself.
That's one.
Figure it out yourself. Don't tell your mom. I know it's so easy to ventilate. My husband did this, and he did that, and he did this. And then your mom starts right there. I want to defend my own baby. Baby. She's not a baby anymore. What are you talking about? And the mom, at least her mother-in-law, she wants to defend her baby. And then what do they end up? Both mother-in-laws, they start ending up spewing all the hate inside those relationships. What did they do? They just expanded the area of the problem from 2 people to right now making it 4. Then this wife is going to tell her husband, this wife is going to tell her husband, then we're adding the kids. We're expanding the perimeter of the problem when it could have actually been smaller and smaller. It could have been smaller and smaller. And the smaller the problem, the easier it goes away.
It is, yeah.
The bigger the area, the harder it is to fix. The harder it is to fix. And that's why I would say, don't share what you dislike about your husband to your family, not to your sister, not to your family. Don't share it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us the keys right there for a happy marriage. He's telling you, be pious, live the commitment, live what the Lord Almighty had asked you to live by, the principles of the Lord Almighty, and be obedient to your Lord in his definition of justice, definition of principle, and be obedient to your husband as long as it's not going against the Lord Almighty. And whenever you feel like talking, talk to your Lord. Preserve what other people cannot say. That's why it's called ghaib. Ghaib means that your home is a secure place. It's not for others to see. It's not for others to go in detail. That's yours. That's yours to preserve, because you are usually, as a woman, without you recognizing, you find it easier to ventilate and talk about it, and you become the area where other people are sneaking inside your home through. It's that easy. It takes one little hole for a whole nest of mice to come into your home. One small hole in the size of a pencil. It's in your hands. Keep that in mind. It's in your hands. Don't let others inside your home. And we're not talking about letting others and bringing invitations. We're actually talking about sharing your private matters. When you're in public, even if you're at odds with your husband, don't let everybody recognize that you're fighting with your husband. Don't let anybody recognize, even if you had a bad day. When we're in public, we're invited together. It's like, yeah, nothing is happening. But once we get in the car, I'm still angry at you.
Or just talk, smile if you have a different language.
Well, okay, well, if you speak Pashto, maybe no one understands it.
He's smiling.
You know, one thing, sisters, wallahi, when a woman starts trying to butt heads like a man with her husband, you won't win.
Yeah.
You won't. Because he starts feeling that, yes, I'm a man and I'm going to prove it. And they'll butt heads with you. But when you are keeping it in and he recognizes that she's weaker, she's acting her femininehood, you'll see him coming and apologizing. Wallahi, you'll see him coming and apologizing. It's like, okay, I'll just stay quiet. The best way to kill and turn off a fire is water. Is water. But if you think by putting in more fire, you're turning off the fire, you're wrong. You're wrong. You don't put more fire to kill and turn off the fire. Whenever there's this heat, put in the water, make wudu, calm down, close the door on yourself, stay away. That's how you'll just absorb the heat, and little by little.
And I think at that time we have to control our ego, because ego plays a big role. You know, you feel the itch that you have to say something, you know, in order to win the argument and show that you're strong
So
enough.
I like that. So here's the thing. Sometimes it's very important before you start going into the argument, learn how fast that person goes from level A of anger to level 10 of anger. If the person is at level 1 or 2, but certain people, they could just jump from 2 to 10 within a snap. If these people, they jump from level 2 to 10 within a snap, I would say write it down. Learn that person's psychology before going into, let me say, a heated argument. Because what I usually worry about is that many times, and this happens, I'm not here trying to say, okay, let's keep on patting men's backs because they can't handle their impulsivity. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying marriages before were working way better than marriages now. Because we, not necessarily just patted men on their back, but we had better social skills in recognizing how to pull out when the person in front of us is not ready to talk. We had better social skills. It's not that we had better control. When we had better social skills, we had better consequences, better results, and certainly better marriages. We had better social skills. And that's what I mean by, hey, before you go into the argument, to practice and expand your social skills, try to read the person. Can I sometimes? Yes, I can debate that person right now. But if that person from 5 to 10, within a snap, within a second, you could see it on their facial expressions. You could see their facial expressions. You could hear their voice tone. You could see even their fingernails. I'm not saying scratching, but you could see that this person starting to move faster, talk faster, Their eyes are starting to grow bigger. Their voice tone is starting to change. Their facial appearance is starting to change. They're starting to slam on things, etc. Uh-oh, this person is ready to attack. It's just like animals. I have to learn how to study human behavior, or that person, whether it's a man or a woman, to learn how to preserve my own honor. You want to preserve your honor. Many think that, oh, I could just yell and just call 911. By the time you call 911, they're already late. Sorry, they're already late. So what? I mean, I work with a lot of women that actually go through domestic violence, and I help them find shelters and all of that. Then what? Yeah, you can find a shelter, you can stay in a shelter, and you can stay in a place. And then you end up, oh, now I have to work, now I have to do this. I'm not telling you to necessarily endure, domestic violence by all means, but I'm just saying, let's learn how to not get it that far. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying, yes, accept domestic violence. I'm saying, let's learn how to work on expanding our social skills in order to avoid even going that far. That's what I'm saying.
The word is compromise. That's compromise.
Compromise.
Recognize,
Recognize, absolutely. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, qanitat, this is compromise. Qanitat is compromise. Qanitat, obey your husband if it's not haram, if it's not more than what your body can handle, just compromise. All right, I don't believe in it, but I'll do it. I don't believe in it to mean not necessarily haram, but I don't think it's the right thing, but I'll do it. Even though I don't think it's the right thing. I tried to convince him out of it, but at the end of the day, he's the boss here. I think it's not the right idea. It's not haram. So I am not doing something against my religion. And two, I'm capable of doing it. He's not asking me to build a wall. Well, even if he does, I know how to do it. He doesn't know how to do it, but I know.
Sometimes you have to put your foot down.
Absolutely.
Make him realize that you are an important part of his life. And so without you, he's nothing really. You have to put
Absolutely.
And I think honestly, but sister, it doesn't work always like that. There are men who don't
Absolutely.
even care.
In giving in or compromising, as we all do here, you were sometimes unwillingly setting wrong standards and expectations. And so you have to break that silence at times for them to realize that, no, this is not okay.
And sister, you must have seen cases where the women did everything and still the men.
Oh, absolutely.
So
absolutely. There are some cases where I guarantee you
the women
that the woman did everything.
Yeah.
But he did not deserve any compromise. Yeah. And I recognize that there are some that once you give in, that they see it as a weakness to step on you. And that some people, you really have to push them out because they're willing to step on your toes and step on you completely. And if it isn't until you tell them, hey, recognize your boundaries, and if you don't, I'll tell you where they are. I recognize that there are certain people, they don't deserve all of that compromise. I recognize that. But I'm here, like I said, I recognize that, but I'm here laying out what is usually untold. I'm just laying out what is usually untold, and I'm here, emphasizing what is usually untold within even Islamic circles. And especially, let me say it, you would hear it from men, shuyukh men, always talking about that. But as a woman, we usually think that, no, if only a woman would speak from the Islamic perspective, she would recognize our pains and she wouldn't see the same thing. I'm a woman just like you. I'm a woman just like you, and I struggle with my husband, and he struggles with me. Maybe I struggle more, but No, alhamdulillah, he's salih, alhamdulillah. But I'm just saying, that I'm not at all carrying any misogyny here. I'm here reflecting the words of the Quran. What makes as the formula of a happy marriage? That's what I'm trying to get to. What makes a formula of a happy marriage? Where the Prophet ﷺ actually said that the Prophet ﷺ said, when he was asked, what is the best woman? And he said, well, whenever he would see her, she would make him happy, and she would obey him whenever he would command her to do something. And then whenever he wants her to bed, she would not reject him, and she would not betray him, not in his wealth or in his home. Why? Because he would feel secure. And this was very common, where I would come across women thinking that, no, if I were to reject his bed request, that's going to make him want me more. And without them recognizing, he's basically going to start finding an alternative. It's not that he is going to want you more. Maybe right now you thought he's going to want you more, but then he's going to find another alternative. It's an energy. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, be careful. Don't disobey his request for bed, unless there was an illness, your doctor told you not to be intimate, unless that is a problem, then that's a different story. Or unless it was haram, it was against Islam, whether that was anal relations, it's against Islam, or whether during your period, it's against Islam. But other than that, it's permissible. And of course, in Islam, there's no such thing as marital rape. Why? Because in Islam, consent was given on the day of the marriage contract. Although it's important to mention that the Prophet, peace be upon him, disliked that the man would approach his wife and be intimate with her when she's not interested, especially on a day when he was verbally abusive throughout the day. You were verbally abusive the whole day. Now at the end of the night, the Prophet, peace be upon him, described him as a mule. He's like a mule, where throughout the day you were verbally abusive, and at the end of the day you were like a mule wanting to go over. He described him as a mule. In other words, that's a condescending way by putting a metaphor that it's like an animal, that what you should be doing was investing in the woman psychologically in order to get your treat physically. Simple. But at the same time, in Islam, there's no such thing as marital rape. Although, like we said, it's disliked. Why isn't there such a thing as marital rape? In criminal law, in order to prove a crime, you have to be capable of proving the offense. The offense simply means, in speaking about a relationship, in the Western world, secular world, it's basically considered, well, did the person give consent or not? So in Islam, because when we're speaking about a crime in where I need solid proof, when we're speaking about crime, that's why it regarded consent to be at the time of the marriage contract, because to prove or disprove consent between two people, how do we prove consent? Oh, she turned her back. How do you prove that she turned her back? How do you prove the consent? How do you prove that, oh, she said this? Or right now, they're actually speaking about every time they want to have relations, that there should be a written consent at the door. A written consent, are you serious? Because that's not practical in a relationship to give such kind of consent. That's why you're seeing a lot of injustice actually happening, because Islam is really concerned about human rights. That's why he regarded that consent is not the only thing that must be there to protect these two, but considered that in fact, even if there was consent between two that were not married, that's a crime, even if there is consent. And regarded that if there is consent in a marriage, but then one might not have given complete consent during the time of intimacy, that there was an official consent at the time of the marriage contract. Therefore, to disprove consent in a way where there is doubt, Islam is all about infinitive and clear evidence. Because this involves accusing somebody of committing a crime, we definitely need infinitive, 100% evidence to prove an assault. But how can you prove an assault between a husband and a wife when they had already given consent on the day of marriage contract? All right. I don't know. It's 12:40. I don't want to take all the time. What was that?
Okay, we can continue to one.
Continue. Okay. So a question. Is the relationship a form of hierarchy or companionship? When we speak about that, number one is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. The relationship is supposed to be bil-ma'ruf. What is al-ma'ruf? Al-ma'ruf is actually in two categories. Al-ma'ruf to mean what is a known practice within that society. What's a common good? That's number one. Two, in good. In general, there are certain things, regardless of a person's faith, regardless of a person's culture, regardless of where they come from, we all know there are certain moralities that are not acceptable. Regardless of your religion, you would know stealing is not good. Regardless of your religion, you would know that spitting in somebody's face is not acceptable. You would know. There are certain things, it doesn't need a religion or a culture to explain it. We know it as part of our instinct. All right? So that's why the ayah made it. This ayah made it as a general term and said, and deal with them in common good, in the good terms, and let you add all the different things, look into the culture. This helps you understand a lot of the good within your society. There are certain common goods that you would know, simple to recognize. Number two, وَلَهُنَّ مِثْلُ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. In general, yes, there is a mutual relationship in where she, just like you expect good of her, she also expects you to invest the same way. That's the ayah right there. But the ayah also said, وَلِلرِّجَالِ عَلَيْهِنَّ دَرَجَةٌ. But there is an extra. Just the ayah said daraja. Daraja means a step in where, yes, there is another higher step of expected commitment or expected compromise from the woman than the man. In other words, it's not entirely in where, yes, I give this much, you give this much. There is a little bit of an expected more investment from the woman that the ayah is basically emphasizing. Now, one thing is that when we look at the qawam, many will interpret it as a form of hierarchy. But when you look at the ahadith, the Prophet ﷺ actually said, Istawsu bin nisa. That was on his deathbed. And he said, Istawsu bin nisa. What is istawsu? Istawsu is basically making a will. Be careful. Take care of women. Be good to women. That's what it actually means. So the Prophet ﷺ is teaching us that when he gave men, or when the ayah is informing us of an instinct that men have, which is that authority, protecting the territory, whatever it is, or let's use the word qawama, that's not a form of hierarchy, but that's in order to inform the women of something that was created in them that is necessary to preserve the home, but at the same time, this is not at all a method to use in order to abuse the women. This is not a method, and this is not a tool to use to abuse women, but this was to protect women. This was to preserve the women. This was to give them the support that is needed. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it to them. So if a man were to abuse this, the Prophet ﷺ was there telling them, listen, istawsu bin nisa. I want you to actually support them, not abuse them. I don't want you using that instinct to abuse them or to think that you could in any way humiliate their weakness or even their different creation. At the end of the day, the Prophet ﷺ right there was teaching them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had taught us خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا, that he had created from your own selves. She's actually part of you, not your enemy, and certainly not the person that is competing with you. She's with you. Therefore, love in Islam is farther than lustful feelings. It's a commitment, honor, and justice. And that's why when we actually look at the different details, and so how do I deal with my family? You've got the Prophet ﷺ actually said, "Kullukum ra'in." You're all responsible. And each and every single one of you is responsible for their own family, responsible on what they'll be held accountable for what they were responsible for. 3 things. Number 1, the husband. Number 2, the children. Number 3, the house. Those are the 3 main things. Your first priority is your husband. Your second priority is your children. Your third priority is the household. So I want to go back to the previous slide right there. How do we actually understand? I want to look at these areas. There are certain principles of laws in Islam that acts as the lens that you see your priorities through. What is my priority within the household? In Islam, there's the DNAIM. What does that stand for? The D stands for deen, your piety, the household's piety. 2, N, the preservation of your life, the preservation of your religion is the number 1. Your preservation for the life is number 2. The preservation for chastity is number 3, or preservation of mind is mental health is number 4. The preservation of wealth is number 5, and that's the same thing. What should I be concerned about my husband with? Number 1, be concerned about his deen first, about his piety first. That's the first thing you want to look for. Number 2 is that you want to be concerned about the life, and that's why the Prophet, peace be upon him, was talking about whenever he would look into her, he would feel happy. Whenever he was absent from home, she's preserving her body, preserving her home, preserving his wealth, and preserving the family, because that's what preserving the family's life is all about. Number 4 or 3, there are differences of opinions between scholars whether mental health or whether chastity comes first. That's why you could see it, going sometimes mind and chastity. Number 3 is mental health. That's why you could see that all of these arrows in where he looks at her, she makes him happy. And in other words, we're talking about that category of what does it mean to actually preserve the household, preserve it mentally, making this household always be a time of happiness. Happiness. Why did the Prophet ﷺ even emphasize that? Because, ladies, pay attention to this one. This is not misogyny. This is real. The Prophet ﷺ, during the time of Al-Eid, he said something really important. And he said, I had seen most of the women actually enter hellfire. What? Why? What did we do? And he said, تُكْثِرْنَا اللَّعْنَ وَتَكْفُرْنَا الْعَشِيرَ. You damn things frequently, and you deny good when it is done to you. Now, on a side, does that mean that heaven doesn't have a lot of women? In contrast, according to Al-Qurtubi, women are actually outnumbering men in heaven. Okay? Now, this is not to say, yes, women are outnumbering men in heaven and hell. All right? But why did the Prophet ﷺ actually say outnumbering men in hell? Because it was, it's kind of like saying, hey, I saw that many of you are going to get bad grades. Because it was a time to invest in warning them to work hard on themselves. But then one of the women, she was like, well, why? What is it that we do wrong? And he said, تُكْثِرْنَا اللَّعْنَ. You damn things frequently. Now, here's one thing. Although it's a very simple wording for someone that was probably brought up in Medina to tell them تُكْثِرْنَا اللَّعْنَ تَكْفُرْنَا الْعَشِيرَ, it's a very simple word, 2 points, and really just let it go. But if you actually look into women, we actually have right now the resources to know more about our psychology than before. As women, we tend to suffer more in depression, anxiety, whether we're talking about our hormones or whether we're talking about our body, whether we're talking about our own psychology, in where we just feel that we can't get things sometimes to be done. We don't have our physical power to probably get things the way we want it to happen. So we tend to somehow take it in, regardless of whatever reason. The reasons are probably a number of different factors. At the end of the day, is that we tend to find ventilation in damning the things and complaining about the things around us as the easiest way to make us feel better. The easiest way to make us feel better. So what would we do? We'll basically just continue and constantly damn things around us. Damning things does not mean using the D word or swearing, but it's constant complaining. Constantly complaining. Why this? Why that? And whenever she's angry, just constantly talking, getting angry and passing it on, and then spreading it within the family. I'm not saying men don't do that, but I'm saying the Prophet ﷺ is teaching us that we have the tendency to see the world with a negative eye, not only about what might happen around us, but even with what the people around us might actually contribute. تَكْفُرْنَا الْعَشِيرَ. وَلِسْتَكْفُرْنَ الْعَشِيرَ. Even when your husband might actually bring in something, try to invest in something. You didn't. You're constantly doing this. You're always doing this. And then once she contributes, it becomes in men. What is men? Bragging. If I didn't do this, you wouldn't have been this. If I didn't invest in this, you wouldn't have been this. Why? Trying to put herself that I saved the world, and if it wasn't for me, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تُبْطِلُوا صَدَقَاتِكُمْ بِالْمَنِّ وَالْأَذَى. The Lord Almighty says, and do not void the investments, the donations that you had given with bragging or harm. Bragging voids all the commitment that you did. You did it for the sake of the Lord Almighty, not to be praised for. You did it for the sake of Allah Almighty. To brag about it actually means you're trying to get the appreciation for it in this life. You did it for the sake of you getting somehow an elevation. And al-adha. What is al-adha? In where you start harming the person, you start wanting to make them feel bad and that they owe it a lot to you. So you start wanting to humiliate them. That I did it, and therefore you must be under my power. It's to humiliate. Going back to the part in where that's that key in where mental health, we sometimes don't recognize with our naked, with our nagging, with our negative vision to ourselves, to our family, to his family, to himself, even ourselves. We tend to actually, it's my fault, nothing's working out in my life, etc. And it's always just feeling that weakness, either the society or either her family, her parents, her husband, everyone is responsible for why things are not working out with her. And never, and usually does not want to appreciate what others have given to her. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ was talking about it as what kills the mental health for that family. Number 4, the chastity. That's an easy one. We talked about it, not going outside of marriage, whether in zina or even not looking at the halal things. And it's a lot more than you actually think, especially that we're seeing a lot of women thinking that, oh, in order to preserve my family, I need to actually watch illicit things or probably practice illicit things in order to bring in chastity, when in reality, all they had done was really get themselves in a whole whirlpool, in a maze, where now they can't even fulfill themselves together. Now they need to get external things. Why? Because they were actually exposing themselves to the wrong things. And finally, the wealth, whether how the wealth is coming in. And remember, halal money brings in the halal fruit. Haram money will get you into nothing but more and more anger. Because at the end of the day, without you recognizing, these things will snap at you. So be careful with that. When we say haram money, we're not actually talking about pork. We're talking about riba as well, interest. We're talking a lot about those different areas, whether how the money is coming in and what the money is spent on. That's what we mean by haram money. We're talking about haram money. It's not just the cash, but it's also the property. It's also the cars. It's also things that we're buying. the food the clothes that we wear, the food that we consume, all of that. And then the children, that's a whole conversation about children. For the house, maintaining the household purity and the hygiene, the art of maintenance. How do you maintain the household? How do you maintain and make the family and make your home a place where the man wants to come back home and not go out? Many women are complaining he doesn't want to come home. He stays out with his friends. Are you talking too much? And 70% of what you're saying becomes to him, he can't process it. He doesn't even process it. Are you talking too much? How do you make him long to coming home? Make him a friend. But even a friend, as a woman, you still need girlfriends. Deal with your girlfriends as your girlfriends. Your husband is not going to be your girlfriend. So your girlfriends, those are for your time of, doing other things. Don't deal with your husband as your girlfriend because he doesn't know how to be your girlfriend.
Not even your friend.
Well, no, he knows how to be, no, he knows how to be your friend. No, he knows how to be your friend, but he doesn't know how to be your girlfriend. All right, he doesn't know how to be your girlfriend. So how you maintain the house and how, certain things that you would like to share and experience and certain things, don't share too much of your household, but he doesn't know how to be your girlfriend. Have a girlfriend, okay? Have a girlfriend, but don't expect your husband to be as a tentative listener like your girlfriend. He doesn't know how to do that. And even if he wanted to be in the beginning of the marriage, then at the end of the day, a couple months later, he'll be out the window. He's like, okay, I can't be a girl here. He's gonna find male friends. And sometimes he also needs male friends to discuss the things that are concerning in the male way. It's just the reality of the world. So don't try to separate him from his man-boy world by getting him into your women world. And don't share your girl information. I don't mean about your period. I mean about your girl information, about your girlfriends. Don't share that information with him. What your girlfriend is going through and all of that, that's private information. Don't share it with him. The men should not know the women's business.
It's like you have to have sections in your mind.
Exactly.
This is the section just for my girls. This is the section just for the husband. This is the section just for my kids and whatever, right?
Exactly. Keep in mind that houses are aura. Your home is a private place. It's an entity. Don't share it. And don't bring your public business at home either. If you had some problem at work, don't bring it at home. That's it. Learn how to separate those entities and learn that not every single feeling you're feeling in public should necessarily come in at home or your home go outside. Learn how to change and adapt whenever it's time to adapt to a new professional look. Learn how to adapt to it. You know how to do it. Even if you don't, you learn and train yourself to do it. She'll be a doctor. She's angry, but she has to fake a smile because she's getting a new patient. She has to fake a new smile because she's with her other friends or whatever it is. Same thing. Learn how to put everything in its place, because those that mix and confuse those areas end up living in a maze in their social network, in their psychological feelings, all of it. It will be just a ball of confusion, and she'll end up confused. How do I untie the knots? you confuse the knots and now you want to untie them, it would be a lot easier to not tie them from the beginning than actually untie them. For the children, that's a different story. How do we actually do? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ayah. How much time do I have left? Khalas, we're finished. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I know she's looking at me like, are you serious? I do actually have all of these actually explained in another lecture, so inshallah, I do.
Yes.
I do.
It's
And
on the
this
YouTube
is,
channel?
it is,
I
yeah.
look for it.
Yeah, inshallah. Inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there was actually a list, so I'll make the dua right now, and inshallah, inshallah we'll end it right here so our friends here can have a good time celebrating our beautiful rida, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala